It wasn't supposed to be her night. Olivia Carter had never been the type to crash a party, much less one thrown in a marble ballroom, glittering with crystal chandeliers, violins, and designer heels clicking on imported tile. Yet here she stood, one hand clutching a gift bag wrapped in recycled paper, the other fidgeting with the strap of her old canvas purse, as a man in a black suit blocked her path like a steel door. "I'm sorry, miss," the doorman said with the rigid smile of someone tired of apologies. "But without an invitation, I can't let you in." Olivia blinked, heart thumping awkwardly against her ribs. Her voice stuttered out, I thought this was the right date. My friend's wedding? Nicole Jennings." The name didn't seem to land. The man was already glancing behind her, scanning for someone more elegant, more expected. "We're working off a list," he said flatly, as though the matter were mechanical. "If your name isn't on it, it's not about the name," she interjected, cheeks flushing. "I think I mixed up the dates. I thought it was next weekend," and her voice faltered under the weight of his indifference. He stepped aside a fraction, not to let her in, but to motion her politely off to the side. The truth was, Olivia had no business being there. She wasn't part of the elite circles that reserved $10,000 wedding cakes and floral ceilings. She ran a bookstore in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town, the kind of place where people paid with coins, not black cards. She hadn't seen Nicole in months. The invitation was never sent to her. Her mother asked her to drop off a gift on behalf of an absent cousin. That was all. She'd planned to leave it at the desk. Simple. In and out. But when she stepped through the revolving doors and heard the soft swell of chamber music from the ballroom, she paused. That's when it happened. A voice, low, commanding, and unmistakably amused, cut through the tension like butter. "She's with me." The doorman turned, surprised. Olivia followed his gaze. A man stood just beyond the velvet rope, tall with silver-threaded dark hair and a confident stance. He wore a navy suit like a second skin and held his chin with the poise of someone used to winning arguments before they began. His eyes locked on Olivia, assessing but not unkind. The doorman hesitated. "I'm sorry, Sir Cameron Blake," the man replied, extending a hand with measured ease. "She's my date." Olivia's jaw dropped. Cameron Blake. The Cameron Blake tech magnate Forbes, regular, the guy who once turned a struggling startup into a billion-dollar empire before breakfast. What the hell was he doing here? And more importantly, what the hell was he doing with her? He walked over and leaned in slightly, whispering just loud enough for her to hear. "Play along. Just for tonight. I'll explain later." She should have said no. Every bone in her body screamed it. But the heat of a dozen stares, the tension of the moment, and something she couldn't quite name, something that felt like a dare, tightened around her spine. "Okay," she whispered back. He offered a nod to the doorman, who, thoroughly outmatched, stepped aside with a stiff bow. "Of course, Mr. Blake. Apologies." As Cameron led her inside with one firm hand on her back, Olivia had just enough presence of mind to mutter, "Are you always this impulsive?" Cameron smirked. "Only when cornered." The grand ballroom opened before them like a fairy tale, tables dressed in ivory linens, a string quartet in the corner, champagne bubbling in tall flutes, and 1,000 eyes all turning at once. Olivia felt every stare like a pinprick. Her shoes were worn, her dress a simple navy shift bought on clearance. She didn't belong here, not in this world of subtle glances and diamond-drenched approval. "By the way," he murmured, as they reached a pair of seats near the floral arch. "What's your name, Olivia?" She answered cautiously. "Olivia," he repeated, tasting the name. "Nice to meet you." "I'm Cameron." I guess, she said dryly. He chuckled softly. You don't look like someone who needs name tags either. As they settled near the periphery of the celebration, Cameron leaned in voice conspiratorial. All right, we need a story. How did we meet? Olivia raised an eyebrow. We bumped into each other in the poetry aisle. You knocked over a stack of biographies trying to reach for Bukowski. He grinned. Sounds like something you do. She shot him a look. You offered to pick them up. I offered to help. We started talking. And you asked me out for coffee because I look like someone who could quote Sylvia Plath without crying. Cameron laughed genuinely this time. You're quick on your feet. That'll help. They shook hands, formal and ridiculous. Cameron Blake, he said, CEO, disaster in bookstores. Olivia Carter, accidental wedding crasher. As they mingled by the refreshments, she finally asked, So, what were you really doing back there? Why pull a complete stranger into your night? He handed her a glass of champagne. I wasn't about to walk into my ex-fiance's wedding alone. She blinked. Oh, well, that explains the heroic rescue. I like to think of it as a strategic alliance, he replied smoothly. And what exactly do I get out of this alliance? Cameron's tone softened. Dignity, some champagne, and a chance to rewrite the story they already decided for you. She tilted her head. You don't even know what story that is. He didn't look away. I don't have to. I saw how they looked at you. Real-life examples like Olivia's are painfully common. You're at the margins of a family, a workplace, or a social circle, and no matter what you do, how hard you work, how kind you are, you're seen as less. Not because of your worth, but because of where you came from, how much you earn, or how polished your outfit is. This story may play out in five-star hotels, but its core, it's everywhere. In fact, I once met a girl named Danielle who worked 2 jobs, put herself through school, and still got sneered at by her wealthier cousins at every holiday dinner. They called her scrappy like it was a compliment. It wasn't. One day she showed up to her sister's engagement party in a dress she rented online and brought her best friend as her date. Her presence alone disrupted every assumption. It wasn't about revenge. It was about rewriting her narrative. That's what Olivia was doing, even if she didn't know it yet. As they stood by the fountain sipping champagne, Olivia glanced at Cameron. So, what's the plan if someone asks how long we've been together? He looked thoughtful. 3 months, long enough to seem real, short enough to explain why we're not glued at the hip, and why you haven't learned I'm allergic to shrimp yet. He laughed, noted. The music rose around them and the laughter in the room swelled like an incoming tide. Then, like a crack in the perfect facade, a voice rang out from the head table, sharp, unmistakable. What is she doing here? Everyone turned. At the center of it all stood a woman in white veil, pinned just so, eyes wide, with something between fury and disbelief. Cameron didn't flinch. She's my date, he said calmly. The crowd whispered. And in that sea of judgment, Olivia stood taller, not because she belonged, but because she refused to shrink. And so the real story began, not one of pretend, but of truth, finally demanding its seat at the table. Subscribe our channel for more powerful stories about love, self-growth, and human connection, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next emotional journey. Heads turned, whispers slithered through the air, like a sudden draft in the warmth of the ballroom. Some were shocked, others amused, but many stared at Olivia like she was a blemish on an otherwise flawless canvas. They weren't subtle. That's Olivia Carter, right? Someone said behind a champagne flute. Didn't her father go bankrupt? Murmured another. She always had that outsider look. I didn't even know she was still in town. Olivia heard every word. The comments weren't even hushed, just comfortably cruel the way people often are when they assume you're too used to being invisible to fight back. She didn't turn, didn't flinch, but Cameron noticed. He leaned slightly toward her voice, low and steady. Are you all right? She nodded, not because she was, but because she refused to let them win. Her nails bit into the soft fabric of her clutch, holding on to composure like a lifeline. I've been through worse, she murmured. Before either of them could retreat to another corner, Lauren the bride, the ex, descended from the head table. She wore a smile as delicate and venomous as a glass dagger. Cameron, she said with exaggerated sweetness, may I steal you for just a moment? Olivia gave a tight nod, signaling he should go. Cameron hesitated but complied. As he followed Lauren toward the towering cake display, Olivia turned slightly to keep them within sight. Her face remained neutral, but inside she braced herself. The old stories were coming for her again. Lauren's voice dropped as they reached a quiet corner. I didn't think you'd actually show. Cameron didn't respond. I thought some part of you would still care, she continued. Still want to prove something. Maybe not to me, but to them. She nodded discreetly toward her family, dressed in shades of ivory and judgment. I came, Cameron said, because closure is cleaner than silence. Lauren narrowed her eyes. And that girl, Cameron's expression didn't change. That girl is the one person in this room who doesn't pretend to be something she's not. Lauren's lips twitched. She doesn't belong here. No, he said softly. She belongs somewhere better. And that was the thing. Belonging, real belonging, doesn't depend on pedigree, old money, or the number of letters after your name. It depends on truth, on being seen, heard, accepted without needing to audition. Cameron wasn't trying to prove Olivia belonged in their world. He was proving that their world had never deserved her in the first place. Back in the ballroom, Olivia stood straight, shoulders squared. She reminded herself of every step she had taken alone, the nights she stayed late at the shop to keep the lights on the book she read by moonlight, because the electricity was cut, the meals skipped so her mom could eat. Those moments had built her, not broken her. And now someone like Cameron Blake had seen it. That mattered. He returned to her with calm precision and wrapped his arm around her waist. Not theatrically, not for effect. Just enough to remind her she wasn't alone. Then in a voice clear enough for half the room to hear, he said, "This is the woman I want standing next to me now." The crowd didn't gasp. They didn't need to. The silence was louder. And Olivia, she didn't wilt. She smiled not for them, but for herself. Later that night, beneath a canopy of garden lights and crisp ocean air, they slipped outside. The string quartet inside had shifted to jazz, but here only the hush of waves and distant laughter followed them. Olivia stopped by the stone railing overlooking the sea, her breath shaky but solid. I wasn't even supposed to be here, she said quietly, her back to him. Cameron stepped beside her. What do you mean? She turned to him, her voice firm, despite the ache behind it. My mom asked me to drop off a gift. No invite, no call, just a favor from someone who hoped I'd be gone before they noticed I was never welcome. Cameron said nothing. He didn't need to. Olivia's truth had its own weight. They stopped inviting me after my dad lost everything. Divorce, financial scandal. Our name became inconvenient, she explained. Nicole and I used to play dress-up together. Then one day she stopped answering my messages. At family reunions, they forgot I was vegetarian. Forgot my birthday. Forgot I existed. He looked at her, something flickering in his eyes, recognition maybe. That's not just forgetting, he said. That's erasing. She nodded. But I stopped chasing it. I built a life. My life. Small maybe, but mine. Cameron rested his elbows on the railing, looking out at the moonlit water. You know, he said, I've sat through meetings where people applauded my every word, then used those same words against me in private. I've been in rooms full of noise and felt like a ghost. The difference is I had the power to leave. You didn't. Olivia glanced at him, surprised by the depth in his tone. He turned to face her. But you never ran. You showed up. You stayed. That takes more strength than most people ever realize. That's the thing about stories like Olivia's. They happen behind the polished glass of people's lives. They're quiet, subtle, never viral. No one applauds the girl who walks into the room knowing she's unwelcome. But maybe they should, because that girl carries more courage in a single step than most people carry their whole lives. As the waves crashed quietly below, Olivia whispered, "Why do you care?" Cameron didn't blink. Because I know what it means to be underestimated. And I've learned something: they can only define you if you let them. She looked away. It still hurts. He reached for her hand gently. Then let me help you carry it. Real stories don't need perfect endings. They need true ones. And Olivia's was just beginning. The girl no one invited became the woman no one could ignore. As the lights behind them flickered, Cameron stepped in closer. His voice was low, deliberate. You didn't crash that wedding, Olivia. You showed them who they missed. And in that moment, under starlight and truth, she believed him. Have you ever had a moment where pretending led to something unexpectedly real? Please comment below and like this video. If you believe the best love stories start with honesty. Subscribe our channel now for more powerful story-based videos every day. The next morning arrived too quietly. The world hadn't changed, but Olivia had. She stood in the hotel suite, sunlight stretching across the plush carpet and dancing off the half-empty champagne glasses still scattered across the room like souvenirs of something magical. Her fingers lingered on Cameron's suit jacket, neatly folded now across the back of a chair, before she zipped her bag closed. The scent of cedar and warmth still clung to it. She hated that it felt like goodbye. She wasn't running, she told herself. She was stepping back into her real life, the one with mismatched bookshelves and secondhand sweaters, where grand ballrooms and designer heels didn't exist, where fairy tales didn't wait at the elevator. As the elevator doors reflected her tired eyes and messy hair, a voice she thought she wouldn't hear again broke the silence behind her. Running, Olivia turned, startled. Cameron stood barefoot at the far end of the hall, hair tousled, a t-shirt clinging to his frame, like afterthoughts of the previous night. He held something in his hand, an envelope. She blinked. "Cameron, I found this," he said, stepping toward her. "It was with your gift bag. Lauren's sweet." He handed it to her. Olivia hesitated, then slowly opened the flap. Inside was the wedding invitation, the one she'd never received. On the back, written in cold, elegant cursive, was a note. "You'll never belong here." Her fingers shook. Cameron's jaw tightened. She wanted you to feel small, invisible, like you were never enough. But that's not true. He pulled out a lighter. The flame flickered to life, soft but firm. Without asking, he lit the edge of the invitation. Olivia watched as the paper curled, turned black, and disintegrated, its cruelty reduced to ash. "You don't belong there," Cameron said softly, "but you belong with someone who sees you." "And I do." Olivia looked at him through tears she hadn't expected to cry. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he replied. "Enough to know that the bravest thing you did was stay. Enough to know that what I felt last night, what I feel right now, isn't pretend." This wasn't the moment she'd expected. But life doesn't ask for permission when it hands you clarity. Cameron stepped forward, holding her gaze. "Don't let people who never knew your heart define your worth." And in that sentence, the entire facade of what she'd believed about herself started to crack. Because sometimes all it takes to shatter a lifetime of doubt is someone choosing to believe in you out loud in public and with no intention of taking it back. 6 months passed like chapters in a well-written novel. Not perfect, but honest. Olivia didn't disappear back into obscurity. She didn't become a headline either. What she became was something far rarer rooted. She took a role as communications director at the Bennett Foundation, a nonprofit Cameron had launched in memory of his sister. Its focus: educational access, community rebuilding, and real sustainable change. Olivia's ideas, forged from years of navigating struggle, gave the foundation a voice with integrity. One day, while visiting a school in rural Ecuador that the foundation had helped rebuild after a devastating flood, Olivia stood surrounded by laughing children. Her hair was pulled into a bun, her shirt smudged with dirt and chalk, her smile wide and unfiltered. Cameron watched from the sidelines, a familiar warmth spreading in his chest. As the sun set, casting amber light across the trees, he asked her to walk with him down a winding path near the schoolyard. She joined him easily, dusting off her jeans, laughing when one of the kids chased them with a homemade paper plane. Under a tree canopy, he stopped and pulled out a velvet pouch. "I've been meaning to give this back," he said. She opened it and gasped. Inside was a necklace, her necklace. A small silver pendant shaped like a book, her mother's 18th birthday gift, long presumed lost. "I found it in the pocket of your overnight bag," Cameron explained. "I kept it because you once told me it was the only thing that ever made you feel like part of a family." Tears welled. "I thought it was gone forever." He held her eyes. "I kept it safe because I knew someday you'd stop believing you were an outsider, and I didn't want you to forget who you are." But he wasn't finished. From his other pocket, he pulled out a small box. "And this," he said, "is just something I couldn't wait on any longer." Inside the box was a gold ring. Simple, timeless, no fanfare, no flash. Cameron's voice trembled for the first time. No speeches, no headlines. Just this truth. "You didn't crash a wedding, Olivia. You rescued my life from autopilot. You made me believe in messy, brave love. And I want that for the rest of my life." He knelt the earth, dusting his knees. "Will you marry me?" Olivia laughed through her tears, nodding before she could find her voice. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Their wedding 3 months later wasn't held in a ballroom. It was in a garden. Guests brought books instead of flowers, each one to be donated to a community library. There were no photographers, no cover stories, just real people, full hearts, and enough honesty to fill volumes. At the entrance stood a framed photo, grainy, slightly water-streaked, from a hotel lobby security camera. Olivia stood awkwardly with a gift bag, her eyes uncertain, her stance hesitant. On the back of the photo, etched in gold script, were 7 words: "Kindness is never wasted. It writes stories." That's what the story was. Not a fairy tale, not a rom-com fantasy, but a reminder that love at its core is not about perfection. It's about choosing someone again and again. It's about rewriting the narrative others handed you and saying, "No, I'll tell my own story." And if there's one takeaway from Olivia and Cameron's journey, it's this: you are never too lost to be found. You are never too invisible to be seen. And you are never too broken to be chosen, not out of pity, but out of truth. You don't need to fit into someone else's world to be worthy. You just need to find the courage to walk through the door anyway. And sometimes, if you're lucky, someone will hold that door open, not because you need saving, but because they finally see who you've been all along. Because real love, it doesn't require permission. It simply shows up and stays. Thanks for staying with us until the end. If this story moved you, made you think, consider sharing it with someone who might need it today. Subscribe our channel for more powerful stories about love, self-growth, and human connection, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next emotional journey.